One of the most famous swords in European legends, the Excalibur belonged to King Arthur of Camelot. In Arthurian legends, the magical sword protected the king and his knights. There are varying accounts on how he obtained the sword, but it retains its significance in every story. Excalibur is the mythical sword of King Arthur that may be attributed with magical powers with the rightful ruler of Britain. Traditionally, the sword in the stone that is the proof of Arthur's lineage and the sword given him by a lady of the lake are not the same weapon, even as in some versions of the legend both of them share the name of Excalibur. The name Excalibur ultimately derives from the Welsh Caeldfulch, roughly translating as hard cleave. Caeldfulch appears in several early Welsh works, including the prose tale Culhwch and Olwen 11th to 12th century. The name was later used in Welsh adaptations of foreign material such as the Brutes, Chronicles, which were based on Geoffrey of Monmouth. It is often considered to be related to the phonetically similar Caladbolg, a sword borne by several figures from Irish mythology, although a borrowing of Caeldfulch from the Irish Caladbolg has been considered unlikely by Rachel Bromwich and D. Simon Evans. They suggest instead that both names may have similarly arisen at a very early date as generic names for a sword. In the late 15th to early 16th century Middle Cornish play Bunan's Cu, Arthur's sword is called Cowsval, which is etymologically an exact Middle Cornish cognate of the Welsh Caeldfulch. It is unclear if the name was borrowed from the Welsh. The sword in the stone and the sword in the lake. Romance tradition elaborates on how Arthur came into possession of Excalibur. In Robert de Boron's French poem Merlin, the first tale to mention the sword in the stone. Arthur obtained the British throne by pulling a sword from an anvil sitting atop a stone that appeared in a churchyard on Christmas Eve. In this account, as foretold by Merlin, the act could not be performed except by the true king, meaning the divinely appointed king or true heir of Uther Pendragon. After many of the gathered nobles try and fail to complete Merlin's challenge, the teenage Arthur, who up to this point had believed himself to be biological son of Ector and went there as a squire to his foster brother Kay, succeeds effortlessly. Arthur first achieves this feat by accident while unaware of the contest and unseen. He then returns the sword to its place in the anvil, and later repeats the act publicly as Merlin comes to announce his true parentage. The identity of this sword as Excalibur is made explicit in the prose Merlin, a part of the 13th century Lancelot Grail cycle of French romances also known as the Vulgate cycle. Eventually, in the cycle's finale Vulgate Mortar II, when Arthur is at the brink of death, he enigmatically orders his surviving knight Griflet to cast Excalibur into a nearby lake. After 2 failed attempts to deceive Arthur, since Griflet felt that such a great sword should not be thrown away, he finally does comply with the wounded king's request. A woman's hand emerges from the lake to catch Excalibur, after which Morgan appears to take Arthur to Avalon. This motif then became attached to Bedivere instead of Griflet. However, in the subsequent post-Vulgate cycle variants of the Merlin and the Merlin continuation, written soon afterwards, Arthur's sword drawn from the stone is unnamed. Arthur promptly breaks it in his duel against King Pellinore very early in his reign. On Merlin's advice, Arthur then goes with him to be given the actual Excalibur by a lady of the lake in exchange for a later boon for her. Some time later, she arrives at Arthur's court to demand the head of Balin. In the post-Vulgate Mortar II, it is this sword that is eventually hurled into the pool at Camlan.